Hello, in this section 3.2, we're going to cover some of the key functions such as map versus FlatMap versus and also pair RDD and then also reduce by key. Okay, let's get started. Map versus FlatMap. So map is a function, right? That means it's actually a transformation. So you can actually see if you have an input file, you can actually create your input file by writing it like this, right? So to percentage, right? And then write file, input, this is the name that you want to assign to this file. And then you can write a bunch of text. This is how you can actually write some, data into a file. It's called input.txt file, and then you can do a bunch of transformations and member actions, right? So the first thing what we can do is like this, right? So this is the usual map. So what is this doing is I want to do, remember SC is our Spark context, right? And then we want to say text file, that's kind of like reading this text file, right? So because we already save it as, input.txt, right? So doing this, you can actually see it's just pretty much partition it to RDD. So we can actually call this, like what we did before, RDD, right? So this is to parallelize a text file, and then RDD, if you look at .collect, right? This will collect everything. You can actually see, okay, so this is actually in a list, right? So a line, so it's reading line by line, and then each line will become an element to this entire list. And then we can actually do something like, okay, so with this in mind, we can actually do split it, right? We want to say split it by space, right? So remember how it looks like right now is one sentence, right? So we want to say hello world, another line, so split by space. So how do we do that is we can actually use this function again, map, right? Map, remember, is a transformation, right? It's not action, right? So it is still, that means this transformation is done in silo, right? In many workers, right? Worker nodes. So you can actually do something like that, split, right? Remember, this is kind of similar to what we had in pandas data frame, right? So x, right? To x dot split, right? So if x is a string like this, you can split it by, by putting the space or just do split, right? So if we look at this, right? So assign this to RDD2. And now we can do a collect again, to dot collect is equal to, okay. So now you can see that this is a list of lists, right? So every sentence now will become a list, and then all these sentences are, all these lists are actually in this bigger list, right? So it's a list of lists. So that's how we actually got to this end results, right? And by doing first parallelizing the text file and then mapping it by splitting each line with the space and then do the collect. So that's great. And then what about FlatMap, right? FlatMap is another function, right? Notice that this is lowercase, f is lowercase, and m is actually uppercase. You can see that the difference is that actually it's flattened. That means it's not a list of lists, it's just a list, right? So that's actually the main difference, right? So map, remember, it's going to give you back a list like this. FlatMap is like it gets flattened, the results gets flattened, right? So therefore you're gonna get a list. So if we just do something like this, right? Yeah, I mean, I was gonna do it one by one, but I think this is pretty clear that the difference between FlatMap and map. Okay, let's talk about RDD, right? Pair RDD. So the same way that we wrote the other text file, we can actually do this, right? And then we want to actually create the sales.txt by doing percentage write file, and then give it a name, and this is the data we want to write. So let's go ahead and write this, right? So now we have this. And then let's do the simple sc like in here, right? So sc dot this is a function that we can use text file, and then we can actually put the name of the text file. And then this will parallelize it, and then we can actually do top or take, right? So this will actually give us the top two, right? And then the difference between top and take is this, right? We can actually do top two. So you can actually see take is like, it's actually grabbing the headers as well like this, right? And then top is not giving us, it's giving us the top two rows without the header, right? So that's kind of like a difference. But you can see that, like this is how you can actually look at the data. And then in here, right? So we have, we can actually split this, right? Because right now, pretty much one row is actually one huge text. If you look at this, right? This is actually a text. So what we can do is we want to really split this by space so that, it's going to be date, and then this date is one column, store is one column, and state is one column, and so forth. So this is how you can do this, right? Remember map and then lambda x to x dot split is how you can actually split a string like this, right, into a list. All right, so we can actually go ahead and do this. This is how we can actually we can actually do maybe top, top 2, right? So this kind of like the difference between this and this, right? You can actually see now it's a list of lists. Previously it was just like 2 lines, a list, right? Now it's like all this is split into another list. Okay, that's great. And then what if I want to remove, this thing, pound sign, right? And then you can actually do it by filter, right? So this is another function I can actually use to filter anything else. So the first 2 lines are the same, right? And then we're adding this dot filter and then do lambda, right? It's a lambda. And then x to not, right? X of 0, right? Start with, this is another function I can use. So it's not, if it doesn't start with this pound sign, then we want to take it, right? Then want to collect it or take it. So that's how you can actually only get, you can actually just do dot top, but if you want to use take and then without printing out the headers, then this is how you can actually do it, right? Okay, so we can actually do it like this, right? Okay, great. So that now, like, what if we want to do something like, okay, so now we have 2, like this, but we want to only grab, the last column, which is amount, right? Amount is the last column, so it's 300 and 450. So this is how you can do it, right? Up to here is all the same. Like you parallelize it, map it so that you will split a string into a list, and then filter, right? So that you don't print out, you don't want anything that start with pound, and then you want to do dot map, right? So this is to say that I only want to do grab the last one. So X now is going to be a list, right? Because you're mapping a list to the last element of this list so that you can actually see the input to this map is actually this entire list, right? This entire list. But I want to actually only grab the last element. So that's how I can get to 300. And then I can do dot take 2 to get me to the first 2 numbers, right? So if I actually do this, right, you can actually get 3, right? Right? You can actually get a list of like 300, 450, 200, and so forth, right? So now you can actually do some sort of conversion, right? Convert float to, and then sum it up, right? So because right now this is in a string format. So what if I want to sum up, right, all the amounts, the total batch amount, right? So the way you can do this is you can apply this float, right, around this this mapping, right? So that each element will become float first, and then do dot sum. Remember, dot sum is actually, you can actually do dot sum or do dot mean. What if I want to look at the mean or minimum, right? But we can keep it, just a sum. Okay, that's great. And then next we're going to talk about reduce by key. So this is really, really important and a key concept, right? In Spark. So what if, the question is, what if I want to calculate revenue per state, right? So remember the data we had was like this, right? You have amount, which is the revenue, and then you have the state, right? The state can appear many times depending on the store because this is a store and date level, right? So what if I want to summarize by state, right? And then so how do I do that? So at some point I have to use some sort of group by and right? So then the answer is up to this point filter, right? This is the same as before,